Hello guys, and welcome back to another Pro Play draft review. This is a really exciting one because my favourite player in Keen picked my favourite champion, Nasus. So I'm going to do a rundown of the draft and explain why I think it's such a good pick. And then if you want to watch the follow-up video to this one, which should come out shortly after, I'm going to do a gameplay review of his Nasus and look at some things that he did well and some things that he could have done better. Yeah, it's really exciting to see this player play the champion. So, jumping into the draft, on blue side, we're banning some pretty generically strong champions. Ashe and Leona are two of the strongest champions on the patch. We're also banning Cassante. This is a target ban at Keen. Keen is the best Cassante player in the world. So that champion has to be banned against him a lot of the time. If he gets that champion, he tends to just win the game. On red side, we're banning Maokai. Again, this feels kind of like a target ban. Towards Peanut. It's a champion that he's very proficient on and has kind of crutched on in a lot of the time. And then we're banning Rumble, which is very generically powerful. And then Vi is signaling maybe we're looking to play something that's weak to Vi. There's like Zeri, but again, you can follow up with Tom Kench. There's Morg Jungle, so I'm not really sure about the Vi red side ban. I don't think it's the best. But yeah, let's look at B1. So B1, we end up with Corki. Corki generally goes mid, but can go AD carry, and he's fairly flexible in terms of what roles he can play in the game. He has some poke with his rockets, and he builds RFC. He can kind of kite back with his W, and he can kind of go in with his W, but he's very much just kind of like a stat stick at the moment. And he's quite a powerful stat stick. He can play bot lane, he can play mid lane, and in very fringe cases, he can also go into the top lane. We saw this in the Mad Lions. If you haven't seen my Mad Lions versus G2 draft review, you'll see why Corki top was such a good flex in that game. But yeah, fairly flexible as to what it can do. Obviously, it brings physical damage, so we're looking to pick up some magic damage, probably in the jungle, later in the draft. Next up, we respond to it with Nidalee. Now, Nidalee's kind of somewhere between like poke engage. She functions mostly as like poke and also brings some healing on her own, but when combined with stuff like Renekton, she enters this engage mode where, you know, you have the Renekton stun and then the Nidalee spear follows up on that, guaranteed hits, and then she can pounce in from a long range, and she becomes more of like a pick engage champ through that mode. But the reason it's being picked is purely because we have Canyon on the team. If your jungler is not Canyon, I wouldn't recommend picking early Nidalee. However, for Gen G, this is something they can do because their jungler is Canyon. Yeah, when you have a player who's so good at one champion that it literally defines its playability, then you can just do that. Now, we end up going for MF. So with the MF and the Nidalee, we're sort of halfway between range and engage. The one thing that well, there's two things I would say about this. One is that there's a couple of things that we can talk about for blue side that could counter what we've picked right now, because we are leaning very much into engage. So if we start picking some disengage tools, one in particular is very good against MF, I'll talk about that soon, then we're kind of vulnerable with this line of drafting. Second, following this line with MF, there is an AP jungler that is probably the best AP jungler in the game that synergizes extremely well with the MF, and that would be Lilia. So I think if you're going this line, I think you should just play Lilia MF. The MF ult doesn't wake people up from the Lilia ult, so they synergize extremely well, and they both sort of flex this range/engage theme. And it gives you two directions you can go, and they just have great synergy together. So I would have preferred Lilia over Nidalee here. But what we should do on blue now is just pick up Braum. Braum should absolutely be picked up. We should pick up Braum, and then we can play anything else here. We can pick AP jungle here if we want. Again, Sejuani, I'm not a big fan of Sejuani because we're expecting Corki mid, right? And Sejuani kind of wants melee lanes. Ideally, you'd play like Sej Yone or something. But it's okay. Sej can play in a lot of comps. She can kind of do it all as well. She can engage, she can peel. She's pretty solid. But yeah, we should definitely be picking up Braum. Yasuo, you can see they're thinking about the wind wall, right? And Yasuo Sejuani here would be quite nice mid-jungle. Obviously, it's blind, so that's the difficulty with picking Yasuo, so I don't think you should do that right now. I think you should just pick Braum. Okay, we end up with Zeri. So Zeri, Corki, these can flex mid-bot. We've seen this. I think this is the same line that Mad Lions took, where you don't know where the Zeri's going, you don't know where the Corki's going. But one issue we're seeing for blue side right now is this is physical, this is physical, this is mostly physical. Sejuani is actually mostly a physical tank. She has some magic damage in her ult and her E procs, but that's it. Unless you like build AP, right? But the W damage is physical, which is the majority of her damage, especially earlier in the game. So yeah, we're looking at a kite back comp here mostly. So I think we should just keep drafting more range on the side of Genji. So Smolder I actually think would be a pretty good pick here. I don't think they have enough engage to deal with Smolder. However, we do kind of want something with Prio to help with this Nidalee. So instead we're picking up Tristana. It does bring some range, though not really more than something like Corki and Zeri. I think I would have preferred Ezreal. You'd play Ezreal mid here. But that's okay. We end up with Tristana. It can get push, it can play around Nidalee. It scales well. And it's comfort for Chovy as well. He's very, very good at this pick. So, let's see what we end up banning. We're going for Alistar. This is good. This is a disengage themed support. That's what we want into this MF. However, I still think Braum is just crazy. Like, if we just go Zeri Braum bot lane, we're really, really happy on blue side here. Like, this can just be Braum. On blue, we're banning Renekton. This is, I already talked about the Nidalee Renekton, right? It makes sense in this comp. We're also banning Poppy, again, disengage themed support. However, I do think Braum being open into this MF is just criminal that it's allowed, and especially now that we're picking Rel and engage support. So here we're looking to go in with Nidalee and MF and Rel, and this is pushing Tristana into her engage mode where she's going to W forwards rather than Wing backwards out of CC. So we're very much playing engage, so the more disengage we can end up drafting on blue side, the better. Now, we don't actually have any yet, but Braum is just absolutely perfect. It's literally the best pick. Like, you could maybe go Taric instead, but I just think Braum is absolutely perfect for them. It blocks the MF ult. It's wonderful. It would be absolutely... It's criminal that it doesn't get picked. They end up going for Rakan, which doesn't do what they're looking for, right? Again, they're looking for disengage to counter this, but they end up picking their own engage. Doesn't really make sense. And then once again, they end up picking engage in the top lane. They're picking Gnar. Now, this also puts Sedge in a really weird spot because she has absolutely no melee lanes. Every single lane is ranged, and I believe Rakan is also classed as ranged for his auto attacks. So nobody's proccing her passive. It's very awkward for her. But yeah, thematically, this doesn't make sense because this is engage, this is engage. This is like engage / disengage. It can do both. And this wants to kite back, so it's disengage, and then this is sort of flexible, it can do whatever. But it's very sort of wonky, and if they just committed to disengage, I think they're happy, because their carries are matching range fairly well. Like, Corki and Zeri are not massively outranged by, like, MF, Trist. There's Nidalee Spears, but that's kind of it. Yeah, and then they can have the MF ult range isn't something you need to consider, because you've got the Braum ult for it. So that line would have been much better. Now here we get the absolute monster R5, which I just absolutely love. We end up with Nasus. So Nasus, in isolation, has a nice lane matchup into the Gnar with E Nasus. You can either do 3E or you can do 5E. Both of them have a really nice time into the Gnar. Gnar can't punish him, can't push him out of lane. Gnar's very susceptible to Wither when he's in his mini Gnar form. It's really nice. It also brings more physical, which Nidalee likes, because now you get to play solo AP Nidalee. It also brings Wither, which allows these Nidalee Spears to land. Once you have full points in Wither, unless you use a dash, you're not going to be able to dodge a Nidalee Spear. It's not possible. So yeah, it's really nice. However, the other thing to consider is, I already talked about on blue side, their full physical damage here. So Nasus can just itemize a ton of armor. And in my most recent episode of the Unranked Master on Emax Nasus, there was a very similar draft where the enemy was full AD, and I just itemized full armor. You can see it's episode 6, the one about Phase Rush. And if you go watch that, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But when Nasus is able to itemize into one resist in particular, he just turns into an absolute monster who can't die. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there's two AD carries in the game in particular that I think Nasus is extremely potent against. There's Kalista, and there's Zeri. Now, why is he so good into these? It's because you can just drop their W on them and they can't play the game, right? Kalista, she needs to auto to use her passive dash. And her passive dash, the speed of it, of the dash itself, is based on her MS, her move speed. Okay? This means that Nasus Wither makes her dash take longer, which means that if she dashes, she can't do the next auto for longer, so it slows her attack speed. But on top of that, the Wither also actually slows her attack speed, which means that it takes longer for each auto to come out, which means it takes longer for each dash to happen. Each dash takes longer to cast, which means the next auto comes out slower, but the next auto also comes out even slower because it literally comes out slower because of the attack speed slow. So it's a perfect counter to Kalista. She literally can't play the game unless she just stands still and auto attacks. But even then, she's attack speed slowed, right? So she's forced to take cleanse, and then the Wither's only got a 5-second cooldown anyway, so you just Wither her again. It's really difficult. Now, the thing for Zeri is very similar. Zeri's very, very reliant on her movement speed, right? That's how her entire champion works. Wither just cripples this and takes her down to like 80 move speed, regardless of how many ult stacks she has. It just move speed caps her because it's such a powerful slow. It has 700 range, so you can just Wither on her all the time. And then also her Q cooldown is based on her attack speed. So you Wither her and she just no longer can Q. She just can't Q anymore. So yeah, enemy team has Zeri. We pick Nasus. Absolutely wonderful. And this, if you watch the game, I'm going to do a gameplay review on this game where I sort of review what Keen's doing well on Nasus and what things he can improve. I mean, Nasus, for me, was the MVP of this game. He just absolutely took over every team fight. He was an absolute monster. The other thing, one final reason I really like Nasus is when you have double ADC. This is why I think Nasus is much better now than he used to be. Nasus E is a 50% armor shred. So you're giving, like, almost 2 black cleavers to your 2 AD carries onto this Sejuani and Rakan and Gnar. These guys all have half armor if you E them. So your ADCs can really start ripping through their front line, and when you play a front to back, you will just win because your W means that their ADC can't do any DPS, and then your E means that your ADCs are dealing double DPS to their front line because you're halving their armor. So yeah, it's really, really crazy in front to back team fights where it's sort of based around the AD carries, and that's pretty much how these sort of comps are going to play out, right? It's front-to-back team fights relying around the AD carries. So I really like the Nasus pick in this spot. So yeah, look forward to the gameplay review. I'll be talking about rune choices, itemization, some play patterns, things like that, and where mistakes were made, and where I think, as someone who obviously I'm a Nasus main, right? And I'm more specifically I'm an Emax Nasus main. So I'll talk about some things that he could do better from a purely Nasus point of view. So yeah, look forward to that one, guys. Thanks for watching this, and I will see you later. Goodbye.